My mother Sip's voice trembled. Wait, then where exactly have you been staying? My parents laughed and said, Your sister will only be staying here for a little while. I stood up and replied, That Sep's funny, I haven't Sep lived here in 6 weeks. The silence that followed was heavy. My mother's face drained of color, her coffee mug shaking in her hands. My father's newspaper crumpled under his grip, and my sister Jessica glanced around in confusion. What do you mean you haven't lived here in 6 weeks? Mom whispered. Exactly what I said, I told them. I moved out 6 weeks ago. You just never noticed. I smiled, though it wasn't pleasant. 6 weeks of planning, 6 weeks of watching them live in ignorance, and finally the truth was out. But really, this story began 3 months earlier. My golden child sister Jessica had announced she was divorcing her husband Mark after only 8 months of marriage. The reason? She'd been having an affair with her trainer, Derek, and Mark had finally found out. Yet, as always, Jessica spun the story to make herself the victim, claiming Mark was emotionally distant and unsupportive of her fitness journey. I'm Teresa, the older daughter, the responsible one. At 26, I was still living at home to help cover the mortgage. After Dad's construction business took a hit during the pandemic, I paid $1,500 a month to my parents, plus groceries and utilities. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I saved for a down payment. Our parents, David and Linda Thompson, believed every word. They declared, Poor Jessica. She deserves better. She needs our support right now. Never mind that she ended her marriage with infidelity, or that Mark had been nothing but kind and generous. But when Jessica Sep's marriage collapsed, my situation suddenly became a problem. Teresa, honey, Mom said one afternoon, Jessica Sep's going through such a hard time. She needs to come home for a while. Mom shifted awkwardly. Well, Jessica has a lot of things, and you know how small that room is. She'll need privacy to heal. Okay, I replied, glancing up from my laptop. The guest room Sep's available. My stomach dropped. Are you asking me to give up my room? That's just temporary, sweetheart. Maybe a few weeks. A few weeks turned into months. Jessica moved into my room, tossing out my plants, rearranging my furniture, and complaining my queen bed wasn't good enough for her back. She even suggested I move my art supplies to the garage because they were clutter. Meanwhile, I was squeezed into the tiny guest room with a twin bed and no desk. When I tried working at the dining table, Jessica would push me aside for her vision boards and healing crystals. The breaking point came when I overheard her on the phone, with her friend Madison, laughing about how she'd kicked Teresa out of her own room, and how easily our parents catered to her. She mocked my freelance graphic design work, calling it not a real job, and said maybe this would push me to move out and stop being such a burden. That night, I made my decision. But instead of telling my family, I decided to test how long it would take them to notice. Within 2 weeks, I found a beautiful downtown one-bedroom in a renovated historic building. Hardwood floors, huge windows, enough space for an art studio. Rent was $2,000, $500 more than I paid my parents, but I had just landed a major contract with a marketing firm that easily covered the difference. I signed the lease the same day. I began apartment hunting in secret and documenting everything. Every mess I cleaned, every time she used my things, every conversation where my parents praised her while treating me as an afterthought. I even recorded some of our worst interactions. Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state, so it was legal. I wanted proof of who Jessica really was behind her act. I made the bed every morning, so my room looked slept in. I moved out gradually over a week, bringing boxes while they were at work. I left just enough clothes and toiletries behind to make it look like I still lived there. My plants stayed in the living room, my art supplies in the garage, small traces to keep the illusion. To keep suspicions away, I did three things. I left a few dirty dishes around and restocked food staples. I stayed active in family texts and showed up for Sunday dinners. Most importantly, I kept paying rent automatically, so no missing money raised questions. Ironically, keeping up appearances was easier than living there. Free from Jessica's chaos, I slept better, worked more productively, and felt at peace. My new place became my sanctuary. I set up my art studio, joined a local artist collective, even started dating again. After 2 weeks, I adopted a rescue cat, Luna, something impossible under Jessica's roof, with her endless allergies. Meanwhile, my family remained blind. Jessica kept posting dramatic quotes online about rising from the ashes. My parents funded her therapy, gym membership, and shopping trips. But the double life weighed on me. On one hand, I felt empowered living independently. On the other, it hurt to realize how easily I could disappear without them noticing. I kept a journal of each day, partly for evidence and partly to stay grounded. At Sunday dinners, I sat quietly while Jessica dominated conversations. She got a part-time boutique job, and our parents treated it like a huge achievement. Meanwhile, I'd just secured my biggest contract ever, worth more than Jessica would earn in half a year. Dad barely reacted, then turned to ask Jessica about her car insurance. Day 12. Dropped by for mail. Jessica using my old room as a closet. Mom asked me to grab groceries, $78 worth that Jessica later ate. Day 18. Sunday dinner. Dad worried about mortgage payments. Jessica suggested cutting unnecessary expenses. When Mom mentioned my rent, Jessica joked they should raise it since I barely used any space anymore. They all laughed. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried. By week 3, I tested them. I rearranged the guest room completely and left it that way for days. Nobody noticed. I could have painted the walls neon green, and they'd still be oblivious as long as I showed up for dinner. The hardest moment came in week 4. I stopped by for supplies and overheard my parents discussing finances. "We really should raise Teresa Sep's rent," Dad said. "With Jessica Sep's expenses and repairs, we could use the money. Maybe $2,000. She sips hardly ever here anyway, always on her art projects. It sips not like she has other options at her age." "That seems fair," Mom agreed. "She should be grateful. Most people her age pay much more." "How much?" Mom asked. The casual dismissal of my art projects as though they were merely a hobby rather than my career was the final insult. That's when I began recording our conversations more systematically. I purchased a small digital recorder and started documenting not only Jessica's manipulative behavior, but also my parents' ongoing disregard for my contributions and achievements. The evidence built up quickly. I saved screenshots of Jessica's social media posts, showing her out with Derek while she was supposedly recovering. I photographed the mess she left behind in the kitchen. I recorded her phone calls bragging about manipulating our parents and mocking me. They were planning to raise my rent by $500 for a room I didn't even live in, because they assumed I had no other choice. Meanwhile, my new life flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without the constant stress of family drama, my creativity thrived. I began producing my best work yet, bold pieces reflecting my growing independence and self-worth. The marketing firm I contracted with offered me additional projects, impressed by my artistic vision and professionalism. I was making more money than ever, even after paying higher rent for my apartment. I also started forming genuine friendships for the first time in years. Living at home had made it difficult to maintain adult relationships, especially with Jessica dominating every social interaction or making passive-aggressive comments about my friends. Now I had the space to host dinners, art nights, and casual gatherings. My social life expanded beyond the confines of family dysfunction. The artist collective I joined became a second family, one that actually valued me. They celebrated my successes, offered support during challenging projects, and treated my work with respect. When I told them about my living situation experiment, they were fascinated. My friend Maya even said during one coffee meetup, "It's like you're conducting an anthropological study of your own family, but your findings must be painful." She was right. Each day revealed more evidence of how little I mattered to them individually, how easily they functioned without my presence. As long as they believed I was still fulfilling my role as the responsible, invisible daughter. As weeks passed, I watched my family dynamics with a kind of detached interest. Nobody noticed my absence at family movie nights. "She's probably tired from work." Nobody questioned why they never saw me making breakfast. I was always rushing out early. I'd changed my mailing address to a P.O. box to avoid delivery issues and handled all business correspondence through my apartment. For Sunday dinners, I parked a few blocks away and timed my arrival so everyone was already gathered. They were so absorbed in Jessica's drama that I might as well have been invisible. The most damning evidence came in week 4. I had stopped by to grab something I'd forgotten and overheard Jessica in my old room, now calling it her room, talking to Derek. "I can't believe how easy this was," she said. "Teresa's such a pushover. Mom and Dad are so eager to help me that they don't even see how I'm playing them." Derek laughed. "What about Teresa? Isn't she upset about losing her room?" Jessica scoffed. "She's too pathetic to stand up for herself. This house is too nice for someone like her anyway. She should be grateful. I'm teaching her independence." I recorded every word. I wanted it carefully done, with maximum impact, maximum honesty, and with witnesses. Sunday dinner was perfect. Jessica often invited Madison, treating it as a staged moment to showcase her supportive family online. By week 5, a painful realization hit me. My parents didn't actually miss me. They missed my rent money, my help with chores, and my emotional labor. But me as a person, they didn't notice. When I was there, I was background noise. When I wasn't, nothing changed. That realization solidified my plan for the reveal. I arrived as usual, bringing dessert and acting normal. Jessica was at the table sharing her latest struggles. Mom making sympathetic sounds, offering to fund another shopping trip. Dad nodded, suggesting help with Jessica's car payment. Madison snapped photos for Instagram. The table chuckled, as if I were being unreasonable for not embracing this temporary arrangement, already 2 months old, with no end in sight. Then Mom gave me the perfect opening. "Well, the good news is Jessica will only be staying here for a while longer," she said with a laugh. "Just until she's back on her feet." Jessica laughed too. "Yeah, and then Teresa can have her precious guest room back and stop being so grumpy about it." That sips when I stood up, smiled, and spoke. "How funny. I haven't lived here in 6 weeks." The laughter died instantly. Confusion, realization, and panic crossed their faces. Mom spoke first, her voice shaking. "Wait, so where exactly have you been staying?" I pulled out my phone and showed them photos of my apartment, my organized, peaceful space with my art studio, my cat, and my actual life. "I moved out 6 weeks ago," I said calmly. "I have a 1-bedroom downtown. Luna and I are very happy there." "Luna?" Dad asked weakly. Jessica Sepp's face turned red. "You moved out without telling us. That Sepp's so selfish. Teresa, what if we needed you?" I laughed. "Needed me for what, Jessica? You took over my room, dismissed my work, mocked me to your friends, and celebrated kicking me out of my space. What exactly did you need me for?" "My cat. The one I couldn't have here because Jessica is allergic to everything except drama." "Oh, but you did." I pressed play on my phone. Her recorded conversation with Derek filled the room, clear as day. Jessica stammered, "That Sip's not. I never." Silence followed. Madison looked like she wanted to disappear. Dad stared at Jessica like he'd never seen her before. Mom's expression cycled through a dozen emotions. Because I wanted to see how long it would take you to notice. I answered simply, the answer is 6 weeks. 6 weeks of dinners, group texts, and visits. And none of you realized I wasn't set living here. Teresa, Mom finally said, why didn't Set you tell us you were moving out? But your room? Dad started. Jessica jumped in, trying to regain control. You stare blowing this way out of proportion. I was going through a divorce. I needed support. You were going through a divorce because you cheated on your husband, I said bluntly. And instead of facing the consequences, you manipulated our parents into making me the casualty of your choices. You mean the guest room I was banished to? It sits not hard to make a bed look slept in when you sits are maintaining appearances. I showed them screenshots of Jessica Sepp's social media, photos of her partying, shopping, spa days, and Derek. This is what healing from trauma looks like, I asked. Because it looks like you destroyed your marriage and then convinced our parents to fund your lifestyle. That Sepp's not fair, Jessica snapped. Mark was emotionally absent. He didn't set understand my needs. Maybe I should go, Madison murmured. No, stay, I said firmly. You Sepp been part of this, helping Jessica build this victim narrative, encouraging her entitlement, mocking me behind my back. You should see the consequences. Teresa, that's not true, Mom protested weakly. I turned back to my parents. Do you know what the sad part is? I've been paying $1,500 a month here plus groceries and utilities. Even after I moved out, I kept paying rent so you wouldn't get suspicious. I've been contributing financially and emotionally. But the moment your golden child needed something, I became disposable. I landed a major contract 2 months ago that allowed me to quit my day job. Did you know that? Is it? When Sepp's the last time you asked about my work, my art, my life? When Sepp's the last time you celebrated one of my achievements? Their guilty faces told me everything. Jessica suddenly stood, chair scraping. I don't have to listen to this. You are just jealous, because Mom and Dad love me more. Even Madison looked shocked. There it is, I said quietly. The truth? I picked up my purse and stood. But here sips the thing. I don't need you to love me more. I don't need you to choose me over Jessica. Mom looked stricken. Jessica, we don't love anyone more. Dawn set you? I asked. Because your actions have shown otherwise. You prioritized Jessica Sepp's comfort over my living situation. You subsidized her lifestyle while I contributed to this household. You coddled her through her own mistakes while treating me as an inconvenience. Can she? I asked. Because she just told you outright that you love her more. She admitted this was about proving control over me. Are you really going to ask her to give up what she's already claimed as hers? I just wanted you to see me, to value me, to treat me as though I mattered, but you couldn't even manage that. Teresa, wait. Dad finally said, his voice breaking through. We can fix this. Jessica can move back to the guest room. The reality sank in quickly. $1,500 a month gone, plus groceries and utilities. I could almost see Dad calculating the cost of my absence. I glanced at Jessica. Her face was a mix of anger and panic. Besides, I continued. It's too late. I don't want to live here anymore. I've seen who you really are when you think I'm not around. I've heard what you say about me. I've watched the family dynamic play out when you believe I'm safely out of sight. I walked toward the door but turned back one last time. Oh, and since Jessica admitted you love her more, and since you were planning to raise my rent to $2,000 for a room I haven't even slept in for 6 weeks, I assume this makes things simpler. You keep Jessica's happiness, and I keep my independence. Back at my apartment, Luna was waiting for me with soft purrs and headbutts. The aftermath was immediate. Within hours, my phone filled with messages. Mom shifted between guilt and anger, demanding to know why I had lied, and then begging me to come home so we could work things out. Dad stayed practical, asking about the financial arrangement and whether I'd consider helping with expenses anyway. Jessica's texts were pure hostility, accusing me of being manipulative and cruel for exposing her in front of Madison. Then I left. And Jessica, I added, looking at her directly, enjoy explaining to Derek why you stay living with Mom and Dad again. I am sure that's very appealing to a man who already showed he prefers women who cheat. In the following days, the messages didn't stop. Mom even showed up at my apartment, somehow finding the address from my work records. I ignored all of them that night. Instead, I ordered Chinese food, opened a bottle of wine, and worked on a new painting while Luna perched on my easel. "Teresa, honey, we need to talk," she said, when I opened the door. "Do we?" I replied, not inviting her inside. "She sits devastated because she got caught," I corrected. "Because she can play the victim anymore now that the truth is out. This has gotten out of hand. Jessica is devastated. She's been crying for days. She made mistakes, Teresa. She's young, going through a hard time." Her face faltered. "We don't think you stare disposable. We love you. She's 24, Mom, and I's 26. Stop treating her like a child while treating me like I'm disposable. You love the version of me who pays bills, keeps the peace, and doesn't cause trouble. But you don't actually see me." "That's not true," she whispered. I sighed and finally let her in, if only to avoid the neighbors staring. "Sit down, Mom. I want to ask you something, and I want honest answers." She perched uneasily on the couch, glancing around my apartment as though she couldn't believe I had built such a beautiful, organized life. "What's my favorite color?" I asked. Blue? Green? What kind of art do I create? Graphics? Mixed media? Paintings? Patterson Creative. And my middle name?" She hesitated. What's the name of the marketing firm I work with?" Silence. The truth hung heavy between us. "It's Elizabeth. After your own mother. You chose it. Pink. Her favorite restaurant?" "Now let's try Jessica," I said. "Her favorite color? Fitness First, on Maple Street. Morello sits downtown. Her gym? Rose, after my grandmother. Her middle name?" I nodded. "You see the difference? You didn't realize because it was easier to assume I'd always be the reliable one who didn't need attention. That's what made it convenient." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Teresa, I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "What can we do to fix this?" she asked quietly. "I don't know if you can," I admitted. "Trust doesn't return with an apology." She stayed another hour. I showed her my studio, my apartment, even introduced her to Luna. I could see her struggling to accept that I was more than the background character she had believed me to be. When she left, she hugged me tightly and promised things would be different. I wanted to believe her, but I knew better than to expect instant change. The real test came 2 weeks later. Jessica's relationship with Derek collapsed, and predictably, she demanded full parental support. I got the group text at 2 a.m. "Teresa, Jessica really needs us. Can you come over? She's asking about the guest room again, just temporarily." The backlash was fierce. I was called selfish, cruel, cold-hearted, but I held my boundary. And then something unexpected happened. Without me absorbing Jessica's chaos, my parents started confronting it themselves. Dad asked harder questions about her choices. Mom began noticing her manipulation for what it was. Slowly they started reaching out to me as an individual. They asked about my art. They celebrated my successes. they began to see me. I screenshotted the message, sent it to my artist collective with the caption, 6 months later, still asking for the guest room, then turned off my phone and went back to sleep. The next morning was a storm of missed calls. Finally, I replied, Jessica is an adult. She created this situation. She needs to handle it herself. I will not be lending money or emotional support for consequences she caused. 6 months after that dinner, I had my first solo art show. I invited my family, not sure they'd come. They all did, even Jessica, subdued and for once sincere. Your work is amazing, she said softly, standing in front of a piece about invisible women becoming visible. I never knew you were this talented. You never asked, I replied, without bitterness. Teresa, she continued, I owe you an apology. I was selfish and manipulative. I convinced myself you didn't need support, but really, I was just taking advantage of you. As step in therapy now, real therapy, and it's steps forcing me to look at myself. I'm glad you're getting help, I said carefully. I step in also moving into my own place next month. 2 jobs, saving money, no more expecting mom and dad to carry me. Are you sure you want that reminder? I asked. I nodded, impressed, despite myself. That night was a success. I sold 3 paintings, including the one Jessica admired. My parents bought it, planning to hang it in the living room. A year has passed since that night. Things aren't perfect, but they're honest now. Jessica is stable in her own apartment and job. My parents show real interest in my life and respect my boundaries. And me? I'm still in my beautiful apartment with Luna, creating art that now sells in galleries across the state. We want a reminder of how incredible you are, Mom said, and how lucky we are to still have you in this family. I'm dating Kevin, a man who loves me for who I am, without knowing my family history. Oh, and the guest room? It's finally just a guest room. My family learned that lesson, and for the first time, we're building something real. Sometimes, I think back to that dinner, to the moment I stood up and shattered their illusions. It was frightening, but necessary, because sometimes the only way to become visible is to step away first, and sometimes the only way to be valued is to show people the cost of taking you for granted.